Welcome to the Community Collective Podcast, a flip-flop agent production in collaboration with the Davison Area Chamber of Commerce. I am your host, Johnny B. Good. We are back for another episode of the Community Collective Podcast. My name is Johnny B. Good. I am lovingly referred to as the flip-flop agent, and here with me is Mr. Travis Howell, the Executive Director for the Davison Area Chamber of Commerce. Man, the sun's out. I'm feeling good. Nobody's looking at me strange because I'm out wearing my flip-flops today. So I'm loving life. Travis, how are you doing, my friend?
I am doing really good. I'm with you, Johnny. I'm not judging you today because your flip-flops fit the sunshine. So what good planning on your part, just to start bringing us into the spring weather. So I'm excited to join you today. And we also have a new guest to the podcast. We have State Representative Phil Green. Representative, how are you today?
I'm doing wonderful, and I'm over in Lapeer today, and I think I see the same sun that you guys are talking about.
Oh, I am sure that you are driving around. It's one of your days to be in the district and driving around. I am glad that you are remotely joining us as you are working today. So, Phil, one thing that we always really enjoy talking to our guest about is what is your background? How did you grow up? What type of jobs have you had, and how did you eventually decide to run for state representative?
I appreciate you allowing me to give the background because that is really a life journey that each of us are on. I grew up on a small farm up just north of Mayville, so a little bit away from Davison, but Davison was always one of the places we went to because you had local establishments such as Whitey's and some other very fine establishments that my family would visit frequently. But so I grew up in a small town, and from the time I can remember, it was just ingrained in us, in the family, that we were going to serve our fellow people, whether it was at church. And my parents were part of what we called a bus ministry. The church bought buses and went around and picked up kids and brought them to church. And then they were also served in a ministry at church, basically a church service for those individuals with disabilities, whether mental disabilities, whatever the case may be. And so it was just ingrained that we were going to serve. And I graduated high school in 1995, and I went off to Pensacola Christian College to study to be a pastor, a youth pastor in particular, and trying to make an impact in young people's lives. And from there, I met my wife. Her dad was in the military, so he was an officer in the military, retired as a commander. And she grew up very similar. We're just going to serve. So she became a registered nurse. She got her BSN, and we moved up to Oshkosh, Wisconsin. And there, I was the youth pastor. But again, the pastor I served under said, "Look, you're going to serve the community." So he got me involved in a sheriff's chaplaincy, and that was very formative part of my life. Also, we had a multi-ethnic group in Oshkosh. They were the Hmong community, and the Hmongs were our allies in Vietnam. And when the close of the Vietnam War, our American government brought these communities over to America to settle into certain cities. And so I began to see individuals that were different than me, different backgrounds, in some of the issues that they have as a group of people. And then my wife and I moved over to just south of Rochester, New York. I pastored there for 10 years. She worked in the ER. I coached in the local public school. I started the chaplain program for the Genesee County Sheriff's Office in New York, not Michigan, but I thought that was very interesting. And then in 2011, the sheriff did nominate me and I won the National Sheriff's Association Chaplain of the Year. So I began to see, and through that program, the impact that incidents have on our leaders, whether it's PTSD or CISD, the critical incident stress. And I began to see that behavioral health component that they need a pastor for, they need help for. And then in 2012, I moved back home, back up to near Mayville. I live in Millington, just outside of Millington. And I became the Christian school administrator and assistant pastor at Juniata Baptist. And again, getting involved in the community and education. And then in 2017, I was speaking with the state rep at the time, and I just you sense different changes in your life. And the state rep, I said, "Look, rep, when you're ready and when you're done, please, I would like a phone call because I may be interested in running." And March of 2018, I got that call that he was not going to run for reelection. And so I decided to throw my hat in the ring and run for election and won in 2019. And then all of those experiences I've had over the years really have worked together. Starting in 2019, I've been the vice chair of the DHS budget, which is about a $45 billion budget dealing with mental health, dealing with just you go right on down the line, everything that I have been dealing with over the years of just serving people. And then in 2022, of course, the redistricting happened and it flipped my district north to south. So I am new to many people in your area, although I have 4 years experience in the legislature. My background is really what shapes me, but then being able to see how the Lord took every one of those different experiences and made it so that I could use it in a greater capacity.
Phil, one of the big things that stuck out to me during that time you're sharing is two big things that influence your life. One, your family. And it seems like that has been one of the main focuses of how you were raised and how they were playing a big role in how you served in your local churches in your community. But then yourself, when you started your own family, that you all became involved in serving in so many different avenues. So to me, that's amazing to see that it's such a family oriented focus and just being a part of where you are and living and taking it to different levels with your family as part of that. And I think that's great for you. I'm sure with kids that you're hoping and praying that you can instill that passion of commitment to be there for others and be there for your community, which I think it's an amazing thing to see that so much can be focused on that and be the center of your family, the center of what you want to be part of.
Yeah, that is as I begin looking at if I can use the phrase societal ills. Um, One of the things that just constantly comes back. I was touring the Lapeer Correctional Facility today, the state prison today, and as I talked with some of the staff and talked with some of the, I guess, inmates, residents, one of the things that came up consistently was that some of these guys don't have a family, they don't get any emails from their family. And one of the officers talked about that he gets to have conversations with the residents, the inmates, because many of them have never had a dad and they just don't know how to go. And so I believe that my first and foremost responsibility is to my family. I grew up in an intact family, my mom and my dad was, I can count on one hand the number of ball games that my dad missed over my whole high school career. And the impact that he has had on my life, the impact my mom has had, and then the number of situations throughout life that have some adverse reactions. And many times it comes because kids didn't have an intact family. And so my first and foremost goal for my family, I want to succeed for my kids. I want to succeed for my family. And then from there, once we have that under control, having an impact greater than that into the state really stems from the success of my own personal family.
Which is great. And I feel like that's where we get along really well is with this role with the Davidson Chamber of Commerce and so many other chambers. We are trying to create a area where businesses create a community that eventually for myself with my kids, I want them, even if they go away to school someday, I want them to say Davidson is a place that I want to come back to because we put time and effort into making it a place where kids want to come back and start their own families and get a job. So that's I think that's a big thing that's important, especially to our region of the state, is that family focus and creating an atmosphere where we can just continue to grow that and build them. So this leads
Yeah.
us into another really good question. You were mentioning a lot of your background and the things that you've been able to be part of in serving in Lansing. What are some of the legislative issues or topics that you are really focused on. And you have an education background and you've served, you said, as the Department of Health and Human Services budget. What are things that you are focusing on for your constituents and for the state of Michigan?
I think having 4 years of background, I could go on for 4 years of the stuff that I've done. But I think if we come back and distill it down to is that community aspect. One of the main things the last 4 years I've been up in Huron, Tuscola County. So agriculture has been a big component of it, but of my focus. But another major focus has been on healthcare and access to healthcare. When we get out into rural communities, sometimes we have to drive a half hour, 45 minutes, sometimes an hour to get to where there is the type of healthcare that we need. And so we've been working diligently trying to create incentives so that our local out of urban center has access to good healthcare, access to good specialists, so that we're not driving an hour and a half to get to whatever specialist that's needed. And so access to healthcare has been a huge component, but as well inside the DHS, right off the bat in 2019, 3 months in, I got called down off the rostrum in committee, and the legislative director, actually, it was the deputy director of DHS at the time, called me off, and I slid down. And she said, I just wanted you to know that we are pausing the new build at the Carroll Center. And that sent shivers down my back. And here we are with a mental health crisis, and we're not going to we're going to eliminate bringing online many more beds. And so that began about a 9-month process of fighting to get the Carroll Center, the state mental health hospital in Carroll, back up and running and getting a new building there. And so I began to realize and see the emerging issues in our mental health world, whether it was depression or even more severe mental illness, but then as well seeing how addictions play into our mental health and play into our physical health. And so over the last 3 years, a lot of my focus has been on making sure that we have good quality access to mental health, and not just in the urban areas, but also in these more rural areas, that we can get the services we need, and so that we don't end up in a crisis situation. Realizing as we go through the budget process and as we have a part in shaping our healthcare, I believe my voice has been very crucial in making sure that we have representation from a rural community about how these changes to healthcare could affect our rural areas. So that's really been the focus. And now we get into some other of the social issues. We get into one of the things that I'm focusing on right now, growing up, of course, in Tuscola County, is making sure that the laws that are passed through the legislature are good policy that implement a real life living in a rural community, and specifically focusing now of trying to curb the gun violence without curbing our constitutional rights. And so it's a very tight balance.
And I'm sure, I think a lot of people maybe don't think about these rural areas and need to have access to healthcare, which is so common. I can here in Davis, I can drive down the street and I'm at a doctor's office easily. And some of these others, and especially right now, the Carroll Center. I remember reading about this in the newspaper and seeing it on the news. And you're exactly right. Our mental health is such an important thing to focus on for all ages. And that's amazing to see your commitment and dedication to that area. That's in the heart of rural Michigan right there, and the need for it. And yeah, I can't imagine if it wasn't for the Carroll Center, where's the next closest place to provide services like that?
Yeah, there's the Kalamazoo Center, and then there's another state facility down in Ann Arbor. And I think then we're looking at getting down into Wayne County. So all of our state hospitals would be like south of I-69, basically.
So definitely, no, I think that was a great example of a legislator working hard, not only for jobs in his area, but to make sure services can be provided to a whole region of a state. So that's wonderful. So now that kind of helps us lead into the next one. And you mentioned earlier, you just did a tour of the Lapeer Correction Facility, and I'm sure you have a lot of things going on in your days. So what is a day like in your schedule when you're traveling your district, it stretches a variety of areas. And I know you by your staff and you are probably so busy trying to figure out where you can go, who you can talk with, and who you can help during that time period. So what's a day like for you in your district?
Tell you, the legislature is great for people like me that think they have ADHD because it changes every 15 minutes as to what you're doing, and it can be pretty crazy. But an in district day, so generally speaking, I'll give you the rundown of the week. Generally speaking, Monday, we are not in Lansing. I am not in Lansing on Monday. I'm in Lansing on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. And for me, it's an 89.5 miles from my doorstep to my office in Lansing. So it's 90 miles, about 90 minutes. And I drive back and forth every day. So I get 3 hours of windshield time every day. And then on Friday, we're back home in district Saturday and Sunday. And you might say you're only working 3 days a week, but I would also say we have legislators coming in from all over the state. My good friend Greg Markkinen is up in the Keweenaw Peninsula. It's a 10-hour drive for him to get to Lansing. So he leaves about noon on Monday, drives down. So that's a full work day for him driving to work Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and then he drives home on Friday. And so it's a pretty tough for him. For me, it's a little bit nice as a different capacity being nice in that I'm able to spend time in district. Generally speaking, I'll give you my rundown today. Today, I had a tour of the correctional facility, the prison there off of I-69, and then had about a half hour to grab a lunch. And then we went over to my staff met me. We went over to the Lapeer courthouse, the Lapeer County building, and had office hours. And then from there, now I'm recording. And then after this, I have a meeting on my way back home. But so whether it is meeting local businesses or owners or touring a facility, we toured a three-dimensional over here in the Lapeer Industrial Park that does a tremendous job in our automotive industry. They're a tool and die maker, a machine shop, or maybe we are having office hours in a different township. There's times where we will call and say, hey, I'd like to talk to the representative, and the best way for us to do it is to go to Arlene's there in Otisville or a local restaurant somewhere close and just sit down, have a cup of coffee with them. So that is not uncommon. In other words, that is common for us to get into small groups of 4 or 5 people and just listen and have conversations.
Well, and I think that's what when you run for public office and you're out there, people are going to see you at the grocery store and want to talk to you. People are going to want to, like you said, schedule a cup of coffee just to share their concerns, or maybe they have a legislative idea that really makes sense. So I think that is one thing people really sometimes don't see that every single day. They know you go to Lansing and the other electeds go to Lansing, but the time that you spend either away from your family or your family's going with you to events in the communities, and you're holding district office hours and you're meeting with just your neighbors and other concerns. I think that's something that a lot of people don't get a chance to see, but they need to know about is that if you have something, I'm sure they can also call your office and ask for help or share concerns that they have as well, can't they?
Yeah, please email or call my office. Our office number is 517-373-0587. Again, 517-373-0587. And obviously, I'm not going to answer that phone call, but call and then work with whoever answers and say, hey, here's the things I'm struggling with. Over the course of the last 4 years, my office dealt with almost 12,000 unemployment insurance claims issues. We're dealing with right now a huge coming off of COVID, the Medicaid redetermination, where we're looking back at Medicaid eligibility. Or maybe it's a zoning issue, or maybe it's something has happened and you just need some help with the state. Those are all things that my office can assist you with. But again, maybe it's just, hey, look, we have an issue here, and we'd love to sit down and talk with you and get your opinions, but also maybe give us a legislative update, and my office can schedule that. But you might see me You might see me out and about and around. Like I said, I'm at Arlene's often. I'm at the Deerfield Inn and MD's. I'm giving all these shout outs to different restaurants, but
Oh
I
yeah,
understand that. But
it's
those are areas that I'm consistently at. And if you see me, please stop, shake my hand, and then maybe even from there we can maybe have a quick chat, or I can get a time to set up where we can have a more in-depth chat.
Yeah, and I think that leads into you talk about some of these local businesses you go to, and earlier in our conversation, you mentioned coming to Davison, growing up with your family. What is something since you start representing this section of the area? What do you enjoy most about the Davison Richfield area that you're representing
Yeah,
now?
and Travis, you know this, but my dad grew up just south of Davison, over on Maple Road, Maple and Irish Road, down near the golf course there, the Elks Club golf course. And it's been interesting to me. My dad worked at the V8 engine plant for years, and so on the weekends we would go visit grandma and grandpa. And my dad would drop us off Friday night. We would meet grandpa there at the little party store on the corner of Irish and is it Lapeer Road, across the road from the McDonald's now. And that's where we would meet. And Davison was just part of it. So that whole area grew, a Meyer and a TSC and the McDonald's, and then across the road, everything through there, Williams right up the street. Watching the growth there in Davison, and then as it has pushed out, my district is north of Potter Road in that Richfield Township, and watching that whole area just with, I guess I would call it foundational growth, where you don't have a business come in, build a building, and then go bankrupt and leave. These are solid, established businesses that have a business plan and are giving back to the community is so cool. And of course, driving up and down M15, just the variety of businesses that I'm realizing I don't have to go very far, whether it's a greenhouse or a couple of gun shops or just restaurants, everything is right there, and it's all in a community aspect. It's not you're panicking trying to get out of a driveway because the traffic is so bad and you stop and go all the time. It just the community is great. And of course, as I've knocked doors there in Richfield Township, getting to meet so many different people, from farmers to UAW members, workers at sometimes the same plant my dad and grandpa and uncles worked at, and just to realize the salt of the earth people that make up our community. And you start to realize why people want to live here. And then yeah, we have everything we need, but more than what we need is an aspect of a community, a neighbor. People know their neighbors, people interact, and it's just, I've really appreciated getting to know the people.
Yeah, good. Phil, thank you so much for joining us. I know you're busy and you've been able to come to one of the Davison Chamber monthly meetings, and we appreciate that. And it means a lot to see what you're doing for the residents of our area and how committed you are to getting out there, talking to them. And your office is providing, it sounds like a wonderful service to make sure their lives are improved on, or you can find resources to help them out. So no, Phil, we really do appreciate you taking the time to join the community collective today on the podcast.
My pleasure, and anything, and you know that anything I can do to help, and hopefully my schedule frees up a little bit so I can get to some more of the events.
And Phil, we had talked to Kevin Daly a few days ago, and one of the things that I think is so important and it's so great to see is that politicians, from what we consider an everyday man's position, you guys seem very ethereal, like larger than life, kind of out there. You're talking to the news, you're talking to the paper, you're talking to constituents, you're in Lansing doing all the things. But realistically, those of you that represent us in Lansing and are doing those things on our behalf, you're just regular, everyday people going to the same restaurants, talking to the same people, going to the same sporting events. And I think that this is an opportunity for our listeners to really understand that, Phil, you're just an everyday guy like the rest of us. You're happy to talk about issues that concern us, and you are open and available. And anybody that wants to reach out really has that opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely. I tell many people driving into Lansing, getting ready to pull into my parking spot, and I see the Capitol, and you get yourself a little geeked up, ready to do battle, right? And then the best picture that I see every evening is the Capitol in my rear view because I've done battle all day and I just want to go home. I want to go back to the district, back to Lapeer, back to Davison, back to Richfield Township, the home. I want to go back home where it's like, oh, I can relax. And I get as frustrated with Lansing, maybe more frustrated with Lansing than you all do, but know that we're all on the same team. We're all battling for doing what's best for our state and our communities.
And we appreciate that so much, Phil. We really do. So thank you so much for taking the time today. And if you ever want to get or join us again and talk to the listeners and talk to your community, you have an open invitation to come back at any point in time.
Thank you so much, Johnny and Travis. We'll look forward to seeing you soon.
Hey, sounds good. Thank you very much, Phil. We'll talk to you later.
Yeah, bye.
Bye.
Well, that was another amazing episode. Thank you so much to Travis Howell, my co-host and partner in crime. And as well, thanks so much to State Representative Phil Green. It's so great to hear from our local representatives. Like I stated in the pod, it sometimes feels as though they're larger than life at times. And when we have an opportunity to really sit down and have a conversation with them, on something like this with the podcast or even individually, it allows us to really humanize them. And they're just regular people like the rest of us. And, it's easy to sit back and be a Facebook keyboard warrior and complain. But there are people out there that truly want to help and be of service to us. So I would encourage any of you that if there is any issues that are important or near and dear to your heart, like Phil had mentioned with mental health and healthcare and things like that, definitely reach out and take an opportunity to have that conversation. Be part of the solution, not part of the problem. So, man, another great episode. I am Johnny B. Good, the host of the Community Collective podcast. Thank you so much for listening. We'll see you on the next one.